Again, we're currently going through a series here on Shoal Creek titled Stolen Life. The stolen life. It's different than what we normally do. Normally what we do is we start in a book and just work our way through it. But the Lord has been impressing upon my heart for well over a year now to do a special series on just why Christians are not experiencing the life that the Bible talks about. We're supposed to have an abundant life. We're supposed to have joy. We're supposed to have peace. We're supposed to have happiness. We're supposed to be light and salt in a dark and dying world. But usually when you walk into a church, you see nobody but a bunch of people who've just ate a lemon. I mean, it's depressing sometimes. And I, as a pastor, my job is to equip you, to encourage you, to strengthen you, to correct you, to do all those things. And as I've been going through my life, I've been, God, why are there things in my life that I'm just not seeing you? And there's reasons. And so we first addressed addiction. Almost the vast majority of Christians struggle with an addiction. It's not always alcohol, not always drugs. It could be a lot of things. You're addicted to things in your life. As Christians, we struggle with anxiety. And so we addressed anxiety. And then we addressed depression. And so we've talked about all of it. And the last time we were together, we addressed depression. And we talked about how it affects all, and everyone struggles with it. And we went through the reasons. We went to a passage in the Old Testament of the prophet Elijah where he begged God multiple times to die. Multiple times, even after that great and mighty time there on the mountain when God moved so powerfully. And we went through the reasons why he struggled with depression. The same reasons we still struggle with depression. Right there in Scripture, we see it. He had fear. He was worried to death about what Jezebel was going to do to him. She sent him a letter. We're talking about a man that literally just saw fire fall from heaven in front of all, and hundreds of prophets of Baal were slaughtered there, and yet he gets a simple letter from a woman, and he hightails it and runs. And he didn't just run. He ran all the way through his country and the next country and out of that one. All of it. Fear. Isolation. Everybody that he had in his life, that God had brought into his life, he removed them. And everybody that struggles with depression knows that fear and isolation are two of the biggest problems. The more we become depressed, the more we isolate ourselves. Exhaustion. A lot of people are suffering from depression because they're straight up exhausted. They are so busy running from here to there that they don't have the time to even hardly breathe. Believing lies. Most of us are convinced that everyone and everything's against us. Poor diet. The angel told him to rest and to what? Eat. A lot of y'all, the reason we're struggling with depression is because you're eating nothing but junk. Believe it or not, if that's all you eat is Little Debbie's, you're going to feel terrible and you're going to think terrible. You got to eat healthy as well. And so poor diet, lies, believing the lies, the exhaustion, isolation, fear, all of it. And main thing at the end is that God asked him twice, Elijah, why are you here? The reason he asked that question ain't because God didn't know where he was. He needed to know where he was. He was hiding and he wasn't doing what God had called him to do. And most of you are depressed because you're not doing what God has called you to do. He made you for a purpose and a reason, and you are not doing it, and you wonder why you're not having an abundant life. You wonder why you don't have joy and peace, because you're not doing what God called you to do. You believe the lies of the enemy. You're exhausted. You're not eating well. You're not taking care of yourself. You've isolated yourself from the body of Christ, and you're full of fear and anxiety. Yeah, you're going to be depressed. So how do you overcome it? You do the opposite of everything I just told you. And if you're wondering what I just told you, there's a whole message. You can go back online and listen to it. I ain't got time to preach it today. I got another one I got to do. And so stop being in fear. Stop isolating yourself. Get you some sleep. Eat well. Quit believing the lies of the evil one and get busy doing what God has called you to do. And you'll be amazed at how depression begins to leave and to walk away. But today I do not have the time to do it. To go back over that message, today I have a whole nother problem I got to address. Many of you are probably aware that I never put the title out this week on Facebook. I did so a purpose and a reason. And the reason is because the title is greed. Number one, everybody always assumes when they come to church that that's all we ever talk about is money. And so I did not want to put it out there for that. Anybody that's been to this church knows that I rarely, if ever, address money because I hate talking about it. Just don't like talking about it. But if I'm going to be honest about one of the reasons why people struggle with living an abundant life that Christ has promised them, that's a big one. And the problem with this one is this. Had I put this out on Facebook, do you know what everyone would have said? I don't struggle with that. And before you think I'm crazy, I'm not crazy. Oh, I'm a little crazy. But I'm not crazy when it comes to this. Timothy Keller wrote a great book titled Counterfeit Gods. You never read it, you need to. He has a whole chapter on greed. And he said something in that book that I resonated with, that I understood, that he's been in ministry for half his life, almost 50 years of ministry. And do you know how many people he had counseled in 50 years of ministry that came to him and said, Pastor Keller, I got a problem with greed. Do you know how many times he counseled people? 0. Almost 50 years, 0, came to him and said, I struggle with greed. I've been in ministry for well over a decade. And do you know how many people I've counseled that came to me and said they struggle with greed? 0. Ain't never had one. This is the one sin nobody has. Nobody struggles with this. And that's why this message may be the most important message I've ever preached in this church. 5 years I've been your pastor, and this may be the best one. But the truth is, 99% of you will not hear this message because you don't struggle with this. And I need you to know right now, every one of you do. This is one of the most slyest sins there ever was. And in America, it is our greatest. One of the reasons nobody ever believes it is because of something we already know. Keller talked about it. Do you know that they asked a question? They went around and started doing stats and asked questions. The question was, are you rich? Simple question. Are you rich? And so they asked people that had a combined income of $30,000. Combined income of $30,000. Are you rich? And they all laughed and said, absolutely not. Everybody that is rich, they said, well, all right, if you're not rich, who is rich? Anybody that makes a combined $50,000 is rich. So they went and asked people who made a combined of $50,000. And do you know what they said? They're not rich. And they said, well, who is rich? The ones who make a combined of $75,000 a year. And so they went and asked the people who make $75,000 a year, who is rich? And I know this is going to shock you. They didn't think they were rich. So they asked them who is rich. And they said those who make a combined of $100,000. And this is going to shock you. The $100,000 didn't think they were rich either. It's only those that make $150,000. They asked those that make $150,000 combined, and only those that make $200,000 combined. Do you get the point? Nobody's rich. They actually went and asked people that make $300,000 a year combined, and they all said, we're not rich. They went to $500,000, and they said it's those that make $1 million. Y'all, nobody has greed. It's not existent. It's not a problem. Which is really funny when you think about it because the Bible talks about it all the time. Yet it's the one sin nobody has. It doesn't hinder nobody. That's everybody else's problem. It's not our problem. And that's why this message has to be spoken. And so we're going to be in Luke's gospel this morning. Remember, this is a topical series, and so we're going to be bouncing around a lot, but we always have a main passage. So we're in Luke's gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, New Testament. So go to the New Testament, third book, Luke chapter 12. We're going to start in verse 13 and go through verse 21 this morning. Luke 12. Starting in verse 13, going through verse 21, and I'm going to ask that if you have the ability to stand out of reverence for the reading of God's holy and perfect word this morning. Luke 12, starting in verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." Oh my. But he said to him, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" Then he said to them, "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions." And he told them a parable saying, "The land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops?' Then he said, 'This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, drink, eat, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now whom will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God.'" Let us pray. Father, I come to you and I'll just simply ask you to speak. Father, I've prayed the same prayer probably 100 times this morning, that I can't hardly do this message. I need you to do it. And so, Father, I'm going to ask you again in front of everyone here, I need you to do this. I need you to speak to your people. Don't let them focus on my words, but your words that are being spoken to their hearts. Open their deaf ears and their blind eyes to see and to hear your blessed truth, and allow them to experience an abundant life that is free indeed of this horrific sin called greed that is so sly and cunning. And it's in Jesus' holy and precious name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. There was a movie that came out back in 1987. They've redone it recently, but the original, in my opinion, was a little bit better, titled Wall Street. Most of you will remember it. Had many great and famous actors in it, like Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas, all of that. Michael Douglas played a big Wall Street guru, and Charlie Sheen wanted to be like him, wanted to imitate him and to grow, and they did. And so Charlie Sheen learned that one of the ways that you can grow is to do something that's a little illegal called insider trading. And so Charlie Sheen got some information, and he made some movements around with money along with the Michael Douglas, the other main actor and the big wig in the Wall Street business. And with their insider trading knowledge, they became wealthy, extremely wealthy. And then the FBI showed up because Uncle Sam's always going to get his. And so he showed up and said, no, no, no. But they really wanted Michael Douglas, and so Charlie Sheen became an informant and turned on him. The point that I'm reading, which is also interesting when you think about this, the whole movie is based, it's a crime justice movie about insider trading, and yet our government thinks that's perfectly normal because all our politicians do it. Listen to what the main actor, Michael Douglas, said. Many of you will recognize it. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is what? Y'all heard it. It's good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms, greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked an upward surge of mankind. And greed, you mark my words, will not only save Tedler Paper, but another manufacturing corporation called the United States of America. Greed is good. I'm going to give you some stats this morning because I like to give stats. The average American spends $1,000 on new clothing every year. $1,000 every year. While that may not seem like a lot, that includes infants and extreme elderly who do not spend a dime hardly. The average American at one time, all right, now the average American has at least 66 items of clothing. Average, 66 items. Do y'all know that when the United States was founded, the average American had three? Three outfits. It was such a thing. Do y'all know that the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, his wife Martha, that when Thomas Jefferson was running for the office of the president of the United States, they had some nasty politics back then too. Do you know that his the person he was running against actually came out and said, you don't need Thomas Jefferson to be the president of the United States because he is so greedy. His wife Martha had 13 outfits. Can't be president because his wife is so greedy, had 13 dresses. 13. The average American today has 117 items of clothing. That one I gave earlier was 66 items of clothing per year. 21% of that 117 items, all right, 21% of that is unwearable. 50% is either too tight or too loose. 12% has never even been worn and still has the tags on them. And 10% is what you actually wear. On average, the Americans throw away 68 pounds of clothing per year. 68 pounds. Most Americans buy 8 pairs of shoes per year, to where the majority of the world is blessed to have one. Greed knows no bounds. Do y'all know that the pet clothing industry is projected at $16.6 billion this year? That's pet clothing. We're talking about animals that will have fur. The average American home size in 1950 was less than 1,000 square feet with 4.5 people. I don't know how you get a half person, but they're there. In 2009, the average home is now over 2,700 square feet with 3.5 people. More than double the size with less people. I guess George Carlin, the comedian, was right when he said the goal of life is to work more and more so we can buy a bigger house to hold all our stuff. He wasn't wrong. Not only has our houses more than doubled in size in just the last couple of generations, do you know that storage units in America is a $30 billion industry? There are 2.5 billion square feet of storage units in the United States. We have so much stuff, and our bigger houses cannot even hold them. Let's see here. There's actually more storage units in the United States than Starbucks, McDonald's, and Burger King's combined. America only has 3% of the world's population of kids, but over 40% of the world's toys. This is the one that I didn't believe at first, but I read it on the internet, so it can't be wrong. But I read it multiple places on the internet. Multiple places. America spends more money per year on trash bags than over half of the country spend in total. We spend more money on trash bags in America than Lebanon spends in total. Than some countries around the world have in their entire economy. We spend more on garbage bags. If your combined household earnings was greater than $30,000 a year, you are the wealthy 1% of the world. But nobody in America has a problem with greed. We just don't. It's never been a problem here. And do you know why we don't struggle with greed? Because greed has another name. We call it the American dream. It's become our goal. And we've allowed it to become that. And so we are convinced that we're not greedy at all, and we're really not that wealthy, but the truth is we're the wealthiest nation that ever existed in the world. Then why aren't we the happiest? It's because of this sin that is just so there that nobody wants to talk about. So let's just talk about it. Number one, the deception. The deception. Greed affects everyone regardless of how much money you make. See, one of the deception when it comes to greed is people think the poor can't be greedy, and that is the biggest lie there ever was. Greed is not a money problem. It's not a bank problem. Greed is a heart problem. Greed is in the heart of everyone. And so even the most impoverished people can be greedy, and some of the most generous people can be the most impoverished people. It does not matter how much money you have. Greed is something that's a matter of a heart, and everyone struggles with it. Greed is something that the Bible has not been silent about. In fact, it made it into the 10 Commandments. It's a big one. Exodus 20:17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor's. And I know what most of you are thinking. I don't want my neighbor's ox. I don't want no nasty animal up in my house. Translate that as tractor, because that's what an ox was. Translate donkey as their car. Their house is, of course, a house and everything else. The truth is, every one of us struggles with this. Every one of us will see their neighbor going around, and we spend the time trying to keep up with the Joneses, and it is hurting us greatly. 1 Timothy chapter 6 through 10 says this, but godliness is actually a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If you have food and covering, with these you shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into the temptation and a trap, and many foolish and harmful desires will plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Money is not evil. Money is a necessity. Money is a gift that God has given us. But the problem is, a lot of us love the money. And the love of money is the root of all evil. And it causes us to fall. In fact, do not miss that spot where the Apostle Paul himself says that there are many who have what? Wandered away from what? The faith, because of their greed. Paul talks about it. He even names some people who had so much love for the things of this world they forsook and walked away. This is a problem, and most of us think nothing about it. And the deception comes in for it. You don't call it greed. There's other things that do it. Do y'all know that there's really 4 things that the love of money really comes to? What drives us to this love of money, to this greed? There's 4 things. One is power. Money gives power. Think about it. Some of the most powerful people in the world are what? The wealthiest. And so if you want power, if you really want to have authority, you got to have what? Money. And so the world has convinced you you cannot have power, you cannot have authority without this money. So go get the money. Not only does it provide power, but also security. You'll see it in our passage and other things. Money provides security. You're not worried about as much stuff when you got a whole bunch of money. At least that's the lie he tells you. You're not going to worry about it. Man, if the economy tanks, don't worry about it. You got plenty of money. So it provides security. Fame. Who's the most famous people in the world? The wealthiest people. And so if you want power, if you want security, you want fame, not only that, pleasure. Money provides all of it. And that's why they seek after it. They want it. But I want to explain to you that if this was true, then the happiest people in the world would be those in Hollywood and in government. But they're the most miserable people in the world. So there's a giant deception that is going on. In our primary passage today, we see a man that is blessed with a lot. He is a wealthy man, according to Jesus. He said he was already rich, and then his land produced much. And so he is a wealthy farmer. And what the Bible does is it throws us into his thought process. As his crops are booming and everything is great and everything is wonderful, he thinks to himself. Jesus puts us in the mind of the rich, wealthy farmer. And he says, so what am I going to do with all my stuff? What am I going to do? I got to build bigger barns. Now, it doesn't tell us that the barns were broken. It doesn't tell us anything. We just know that his barns already existed because you can't build bigger ones if you ain't got one. And the ones that he had were so full, he had to have different ones to get all this stuff in it. And so he had all this stuff. And so he went and just got him some storage units too. That's what he does. And so it puts us in there. The problem is that he does so because he wants to live a carefree life. That's what he says. Just rest. Man, eat, drink, and be merry. Everything is going to be great. And when he get into the thought process, what was the first thing he thought about? What am I going to do with my stuff? It's entitlement. See, everybody, even here in this conservative South, everybody's all against the entitlement mentality of the United States, and I'm with you. The entitlement mentality gets on my nerves too. But what I realized a long time ago, every time you point a finger at somebody, you got three coming right back at you. Every one of us struggle with entitlement. You know why? Because the first time you get a raise, the first thing you think of is, what are you going to do? Because it's you. You earned it. It's yours. And so that's it. It's the entitlement part of it. And so Jesus here is addressing a farm. He's addressing a farm, and I love that. And I can relate to that because it's a farm. Y'all know what farmers do? They go out and they plow the ground. They throw the seed in. But at the end of the day, you got to hope that the rain comes and grows. You got to hope the bees come and pollinate. You got all these things that are completely out of your control. You're not in control as a farmer. You just don't. It's a different style of life living as a farmer. Rand, can you make your cows do what cows do? Can you make sure that they're going to make multiple babies and they're all going to be happy? No, you're not in control of that. I'm no more than a farmer's in control of the wheat, giving better crops. God is ultimately in control of it. But you all recognize that as a farm, but I need you to understand that's true whether you're a farmer or not. He is the creator and sustainer of all things. Let me ask you this question. How many of you were asked if you could be born in the United States? None of y'all asked? God didn't ask your opinion? You were just born? How many of you asked to be born in your particular family? How many of you asked to be born in that neighborhood? Or with your color of skin? To your parents in particular? To your grandparents? To your neighbors? How many of you were asked and said, you know what, I wanted this level of IQ. I wanted this special gift and ability. Y'all, I'm still upset that I'm 6'3" and I can't dunk a basketball. It's embarrassing. I understand why 5 foot nothing can't, but I'm big. Why can I not jump? I'm the living example of white men can't jump. Understand, we all are given so much, and it's all out of our control, and God is the one that's ultimately in control of it. When it boils down to greed, grievous covetousness, and idolatry, that's what it boils down to. Colossians 3:5. The Apostle Paul said it this way. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is what? Idolatry. Covetousness, greed, holding all these things is idolatry. It becomes your God because it's what takes care of you. It's what maintains you. It's what gives you your peace and your satisfaction. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one or love the other, and he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and what? Money. Why did he pick money? Because it is idolatry. It is what so many people seek after. That's why the Bible immediately goes from this point into anxiety. Jesus jumps straight into don't worry. Why? Because most people hold on to money and greed because that's all they can think of is security. They want to be in control of all things, and they have absolutely no faith in God at all. They just take God out of it because they're going to save up enough money to take care of themselves, to be in charge of themselves. This man was going to tear down his barn and build bigger barns so he could relax, so he could chill out and be in control of his life and not have to worry about nothing. And so who is this God? Is it money or is it God itself? It's money. That's the whole point behind all of it. God sees a man who only truly thought of himself. Look in verse 21. Such is the one who stores up treasures for himself and is not rich in relation to God. Let me ask you this question. When you come into a sum of money, when you get a raise, you get a promotion, does God ever cross your mind? Or is self the first thing that crosses mind? Do you see the slyness of this thing? Do you see the fact that we all struggle with it? Every one of us does. And that's the point. Our possessions have become our God, and it controls our whole lives. I'll give you an example. This is something I was talking in a gym the other day with a guy that doesn't even go to our church, but we were both talking about it. The Bible is absolutely clear that children are a blessing to God. They're a blessing. The Bible actually says that children are like arrows in a quiver. You need a bunch of them. Bunch of them. Do you know why the birth rate has dropped in America to devastating levels? Y'all do realize that we're actually losing numbers in America. The birth rate is so low. In particular to Caucasians, which is the majority of the people here this morning. We're not even hardly reproducing one in a family anymore, much less two to make it equal. Do y'all know why the birth rate's so low? It's a rhetorical question. You already know the answer. Because they're too what? Expensive. Really? What amazes me is that people used to be far poorer than we ever were, and they had bukus of kids. Do you know why kids are too expensive now? Because our toys are so expensive. It's because it's about us. Most people will put off having children until later in life. Why? It's because they want to get their life together first. They're in control. They don't hold to what the Bible actually says. They believe what they believe. They're going to get their life together. They're going to get their degree together. They're going to get all their money saved up. They're going to get the house that they want. They're going to get all the stuff that they want. And then we're going to bring in the burden. Everything has changed when it comes to our mindsets and what we think of. Greed has literally put its fingers on everything that we do. My mother told me a long time ago when I first got married, and it's a true fact, that if you wait till you can afford kids, you ain't never going to have them. And that's the truth. But we have believed the lie. We believe that you can't afford them. And the truth is you can't afford them. It just means you're going to have to cut back on some of your toys, some of your pleasures. The life ain't going to revolve around you and your wants because you are not God. Do y'all understand it's the same lie that the serpent told Eve in the beginning? We keep falling for it over and over again. It's greed. And it has eaten us up. That's why we have to wear certain brands of clothing. We've got to live in a certain neighborhood or a certain city. Our kids have to go to a particular school so that they can go to another Ivy League school and become a great and wonderful person. It is a lie. And every one of us is bought into it. God has taken a back seat a long time ago. We become our own gods, and greed is the main culprit behind it. The Bible never stops to warn us about this sin that nobody has. Matthew 19:24, Jesus said, "Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of God." You know why? Because money has become to God. Why do you need to ask Him for daily bread when I can buy all the bread I want? Ecclesiastes 5:10. The wisest of all said this, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. Y'all do realize that they asked, I forget the guy's name, but they asked one of the wealthy guys, how much money is enough? And he said, a little bit more. It's always going to be more. There's never enough. Never. James 5, 1 through 6. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of the host, and you have lived on earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts for the day of slaughter. I don't know about you, but that don't sound good. But don't worry, because this is a sin ain't none of y'all got. It's deceptive. Greed is the most deceptive of sins. See, it was obvious when I was a raging alcoholic. Everybody knew it. It's obvious when you struggle with anxiety. Everybody can see it. It's obvious when you struggle with depression. But greed? Man, greed is good in America. And it's something that everybody will tell you you need. It's taught to you as a child to go and to get yours. We now promote it all the time. That's why children have become. That's why I use that subject. They're a burden to us now. Why? Because it's all about us. It's us, always us. We have become our own gods. That's the problem. It's idolatry. I know what some of you are thinking. Wait a minute, it's good to prepare. I ain't saying it ain't good to prepare, but I can almost hear the devil looking at God in heaven saying, God, I ain't trying to start a rebellion with it. I'm just trying to help you out and do it a little bit different. And that's all we ever do. We're telling God, hey, let me make all this and let me take care of all this, and then I'll follow you, which is simply not true. So it's deceptive. Now we'll move to the deliverance part of it, because you get it. We all struggle. So how do we get around it? Well, the first thing you'll have to do is contentment. All right, so you get to the deliverance, and the way to get out of deliverance is going to end up being through contentment. You find this right there in 1 Timothy chapter 6, 6 through 8. But godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into this world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. And if we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. The truth is, how many of us are really content with just food and covering? We're really not. And so we struggle with this constantly. In order to experience the abundant life and the full life that Christ talks about, we have to learn to be content. We actually have to learn this. Contentment actually brings on happiness. It will bring it on. Contentment is where you're going to truly find happiness. Believe it or not, happiness is not in the next motorcycle. I keep trying to tell myself that. I think I had a conversation with Todd last night. If I love my motorcycle, I just wish I had a little lighter one to ride around town in. It's crazy, but that's the way our minds think. We think the next thing is what's going to give us happiness, but true happiness is found in contentment. That's the truth. I'll give you an example. I never understood it. My grandfather went through the Great Depression. And my grandfather, coming out of the Depression, would go, and they had to sell off over the years many parts of the farm, the family farm. But the Lord blessed him and allowed him to eventually start to buy back the family farm, to regain everything that he lost. And he eventually became a state representative. He was an important man, did great and wonderful things. But I would sit there and work on the farm, the cattle farm, with my grandfather as we'd build a fence. And he would always say this weird phrase: I was happier when I was poorer. What? That's the craziest thing I ever heard in my life. You were happier when you were poorer? Yeah. Because now he used to not have to worry about all the farm. He used to not have to worry about all the vehicles. He used to not have to worry about this and that and that. He could just be. He was happier when he was poor. The truth is, y'all, you cannot buy your way into happiness. You cannot. It's not there. It has to come through contentment. I'll give you an example in my own life. I currently have a Silverado. It is a 2018 Silverado is what I have. But do you know that wasn't my first Silverado? The first Silverado I had was a 1985 Chevy Silverado. There's a picture of it. That is the sexiest thing I've ever seen in my life. If you've ever wanted to know what you can get, Brother Mahlon, that is awesome. And the thing is, I sold that for $1,200 because I was convinced the next truck, the 1995 Silverado, was going to make me so much happier than that joker because it had a newer radio. I didn't have to do this and this. You don't even know what I'm talking about, kids. I didn't have to push the cassette player in and rewind and flip. Man, I had an automatic depth flick. No, I didn't. It had a new CD player. And I was going to be one of the cool kids with a giant CD book in my truck. And I sold that truck for a little of nothing. Do you know that truck ran fine? Do you know that truck, I could actually work on that thing. It wasn't a computer. You didn't have to plug nothing in. You just needed some grease and some wrenches. I could sit in there with the engine. There was not a whole bunch of stuff. It's just an engine. And now I've got this new Silverado. It's new to me, 2018, and it's got this giant computer sitting there. And for whatever reason, there's a gremlin in it. And it hates me. And it constantly is beeping, and it doesn't work. There's something wrong with it. And now I can't even make phone calls. So if you call me and I'm in my truck, I cannot answer it because it's going to send me over to Iraq. It's the weirdest thing. You just have to be in there. Y'all, it changed to Spanish the other day, and I couldn't even know what I was looking at. There's something wrong with it. And do you know what I spend the majority of my time thinking about now? God, I wish I had my 1985 Chevy Silverado. If there's something y'all are wondering about what you can get me for Christmas, I'll trade you a 2018 up right now. Y'all, we all do this all the time. How many of you have given up a good job because you thought there'd be a better job down the road, and when you got there, you realized you had a good job? How many of you have thought and you spent your whole night going from one swiping to the right or to the left looking for a different partner when you had a good partner? How many of you have gone to Zillow every night looking for your dream home when you got a good home? You're always looking for the next best thing. How many of you have bought a great expensive Christmas present for your child only to watch your child play with the box? The truth is, we all do this. We've all had it. We've missed it. Happiness is contentment. It's not the next thing. Philippians 4, 10 through 13, it says this, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at least you have received your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked an opportunity to act. Not that I speak as from need, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I'm in. I know how to get along with little. I also know how to live in prosperity. And in any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both having an abundance and suffering in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." We love that last part. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. We quote it all the time. But this is in context to being content with what you got. I can do all things with the home that God's already given me. I can do all things with the car that God's already given me. I can do all things with the church that God's already given me. I can do all things with the family God's already given me. Why do we keep throwing it away for the next thing? It's greed. It has always been there. And it is sly and it is deceptive. We have to learn to be content. Nobody's born content. You got to learn contentment. Hebrews 13:5. But keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Again, everybody quotes that last part. I will never leave you or forsake you. But what's it in context to? Contentment. Being content with what you got. Are you starting to see that the Bible talks about greed an awful lot? And being content awful lot? All these great verses that we apply to every sports team we've ever had in our own personal lives, every bit of it's in context to this. And yet it's the one thing that is truly struggling us. So you got to learn to be content. Well, how do you learn to be content? Here you go. Number one, gratefulness. You got to learn to be grateful. This is one of the reasons why I'm such a stickler about Thanksgiving. Anybody that's ever hung out with me long enough to know that I love Thanksgiving. One of the reasons I love Thanksgiving is because of food, all right? That's a sin for another day for us to talk about, gluttony. But I love Thanksgiving. But you know, one of the reasons why I love Thanksgiving, I've never walked out of Thanksgiving saying, oh my God, I'm in debt. It's never happened. Because Thanksgiving ain't about going in debt. Thanksgiving is not about presents. Thanksgiving is about what? Giving thanks. For what? You're grateful for what you have. The other day, in my house hadn't always been great and wonderful. In the last few months, it's been a little rough. And that's a story for another day. But I wanted to change the attitude of my family. And so I made them go on a walk. And, of course, my little teenage daughter was ecstatic about going for a walk. And I made her leave her phone at home. Oh, my God. And so leave your phone at home. We're going for a walk. Get in the car and be happy. And so get in the car and we drive out there, and I've got my dog with me, the only one that's happy. Everybody else is mad. The dog's ecstatic. And I got my dog, and we're walking through the woods, and I'm sitting there, and I pick up a pine cone, and I throw it to my wife. She catches it, and I said, every time I throw this pine cone, or we give this pine cone to someone, you got to say something that you're thankful for. Because I'm over everybody being miserable. I'm over this. So we're going to walk for 5 miles. Yeah, come to my house. You're going to get the point by the time this joker's over. So for 5 miles we walked. It's a round trip, y'all, round trip. And so for 5 miles we walked, and I tossed that pine cone constantly because I wanted my daughter to say what she was thankful for. And I wanted my wife to say what she was thankful for. And I wanted them to know what I was thankful for. So for 5 miles, all we did was give thanks. And do you know what the amazing thing is? By the time we got back in that truck, nobody was grumbling and crying, other than the fact that they walked 5 miles. But they weren't, it changed. And the reason why, y'all, is it's hard to be miserable when you're grateful. It's hard to be greedy when you love everything that you got. And so I just wanted them to focus on that. Focus on being grateful for what they have. Y'all, I've never understood that we can walk out of things. Have y'all ever thought that we live in a fallen world and there's a prince and a power in this world? The world itself is bad. There's a spirit of the world. Do y'all ever wonder why Christmas has overtaken everything in America? Could it really be greed? I really believe it is. It's not that I'm against Christmas. I love Christmas. I just think it's been hijacked. And we have fallen to this. And we don't realize it's all about us and all we can get. And we've missed the fact that we can't just sit and be grateful. Instead, as soon as Thanksgiving ends, we're immediately fighting over each other in lines for Black Friday. Thank you, God, for my life. Now let me go get my 80-inch TV and drop some flying elbows on the ones in my way. It's not, and you wonder how the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's through this. Something else, and this is something I was telling Mickey at the gym the other day. Not just great gratitude. Gratitude is a wonderful thing, and it will help you to be content. But there's something else, something that we just are very terrible about, and that's savor. Savor. I've got friends that I don't think ever taste their food. As soon as they sit at the table, whoop, it's gone. Every now and then, it's nice to just savor the food, to actually taste the ingredients, to see the flavor, to enjoy the meal. There are some people, I love a good dessert, but as a kid, I used to eat the whole pie, and now, as an adult, I actually take time to take small bites because I enjoy this thing. And I also know it's going to put 1,000 pounds on me. But I love to actually savor food now. And the whole point is this, is I want you to understand, we need to learn to savor life. Savor your life. Young ones, young people, you are going to sit there and you're thinking, if I could get this girl or this guy, my life would be so much better. And then you're going to think, once you're dating them, man, if we could just get married, we'd be so much happier. And then you get married. And then you're going to think, man, if I could just have a kid, we're going to be so much happier. And you have your kid. And then you're going to think, oh, I can't wait till my kid's old enough to play sports. Whew. Then your kid plays sports, and you're riding them everywhere. All the time, constantly. And you're then thinking, I can't wait until they're gone. And I'm an empty nester. And then you think, I can't wait till I retire. Then I'll be happy. And unfortunately, it's at the end of your life that you start to realize that all of it was good. And you wasted your life chasing after something that you didn't have when you had something amazing. Do y'all know that half the people in the world would love to have the spouse you got? They'd love to have anybody in their life. Half the world would love to have your home. Half the world would love to have your car. Half the world would love to have your clothes. Half the world would love to have your body. Most of you hate yourselves. And there are people out there that look at you with awe. Half of you are like, I can't wait till my kids go. Let me tell you, for someone who's lost a child, I can't wait for mine to come back. Stop wasting your life chasing after all the stuff of this world and begin to savor and be grateful for what you got. Because it's going to be too late when it's gone. And we're all sitting here in it. The world has convinced us you got to have this and this and this. How many times have you walked in to your house, opened the refrigerator door to a refrigerator full of food and said, I ain't got nothing to eat? How many of you walked into your walk-in closet, which ought to be enough right there? Your closet's so big you get to walk into it. You walk into it and you say, I have what? Nothing to wear. We got everything. And we've allowed this world to convince us you got nothing. And you're going to have to go out there and continue to slave and to work yourself into a tizzy to chase after these things that are never going to make you happy. How many times have you taken a perfectly good phone to go get another good phone? How many of you have actually gone and taken a vehicle to a dealership and drove off with what? Another vehicle. And of extra payment. We're never grateful, and we're never savoring what we got. And the whole point behind it is greed, y'all. Last thing when it comes to it is giving. I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, I knew that was coming. Let me say this. I used to tell myself all the time when it came to giving that if I could just make a little bit more, I'd give more. Once I get out of this position, then I'll start giving. Let me tell you that all stats say that's a lie. Every stat out there, I don't care which one you go to, the more money you make, the less you give. And that's true across the board. It ain't just true of Christians, it's true of non-believers. The more money you make, the less you give. Proportionally. That's the key. Because what they've realized that people that gave a certain amount in their youth when they were young and they had all this debt, they're still giving the same amount even though they're making 3 or 4 times as much later in life. They don't ever give more. They just got more. And that's the truth. There are some of you that are thinking, I'll give when I get. That is a lie. You will not. Because nobody does. That's not how the world works. Greed doesn't work that way. The more you make, the more you keep. And that's the point. Y'all, giving is something. There's an old saying. An old saying says this: if God can get it through you, He can get it to you. The problem is most people are not willing to give because they're greedy. It's all about them. That's just the way it is. Matthew 25:23, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Y'all, if you don't have a charitable heart now, you ain't just going to grow one because you got rich. That ain't how that works. You got to look at your heart now. And if you're not willing to give now, then you're not going to give when you get more money. 2 Corinthians 9:7, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. If you don't like to give now, you ain't going to like to give when you get rich. It ain't going to change. And so the problem is most of us have that greedy heart. And we refuse to let go of anything because it's all about us. In closing, the rich fool in this passage was only rich toward himself. He was never rich toward God or God's kingdom. He never thought about God's kingdom. That was the last of his concerns. And if we would be honest with ourselves, God's kingdom is usually one of the last things we're concerned about too. It's only after we get mine do we care. 1 John 2:15 and 17. Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but it's from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lust. But the one who does the will of God continues to live forever. I've said this multiple times as your pastor, and I'm going to say it again. There's nothing wrong with you having an RV, but you do need to realize that one day somebody else's butt's going to be driving that RV. There's nothing wrong with you riding a motorcycle beside me. I hope you do. But you need to know somebody else is going to have that butt on that motorcycle. You die early enough, somebody else is going to have your spouse probably. Somebody else is going to live in your home. Be careful what you spend your life for, because the vast majority of the things that you're giving your life to, you have not. It's not yours. And it's going to waste away. And you put nothing into the one thing that's actually going to last, and that's your soul. That's why Jesus says, what are you going to give for your soul? But we throw it all away. 1 Timothy 6:17 and 19. As for the rich in the present age, challenge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. I want you to see one thing. Y'all, there's nothing wrong with enjoying what God has given you. He says that who richly provides us with everything to what? Enjoy. There's nothing wrong with me enjoying riding a motorcycle. But if that's all I ever focus on, and I'm not generous toward God, then I have failed. And you need to make sure of that too. Focus on what God can do for you, because you need to understand that in the culture that we live in this great and wonderful country that we live in, there is a sly serpent called greed. And it is wrapped around each and every one of our lives. It's a snake, y'all. And it has all of us. I was reading an article the other day about a guy, and it's amazing how many times this happens in the world. He had a pet boa constrictor, and he was showing his friend his pet boa. And you know what that snake did? Did what a snake does. He wrapped around his owner's neck, and his friend didn't help him. He took off to run to go get him some help. Well, by the time the ambulance showed up, guess what? He's dead. That snake wrapped around and did what a boa constrictor does. He constricted his airway. Most of you do not realize that you are being choked to death, that your walk with Christ is not what it should be, because there is a serpent of greed that has wrapped you up tighter than you can even realize. And my prayer today is that you will experience the abundant life that Christ has provided for you, that you will begin to be rich toward Him and enjoy the blessings that He has given you, and not just keep it for yourself. Reject greed, because y'all, that is the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's just one of his many tactics. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to come here today to try to address this subject. Father, I know it's not a subject that everybody just jumps up and says, ooh, I can't wait to talk about greed. But Father, I know it is something that is in every one of our lives. And the reason I know that is because the Bible literally addresses it almost in every book. Father, help us to get away from covetousness, to stop seeking after all the things of this world, and just be grateful, thankful, and content. To learn to be content with what you've given us, and allow us to be rich towards you and toward others, and not just ourselves. Father, you have blessed us so much here in America. Help us to truly focus on what the gospel teaches, that we will not seek our power, our security, our fame, and our pleasures in the wealth and the things of this world. But we will actually find our power and our security and our pleasure in you. Help us to break away from the lies of the enemy that keeps telling us to seek the things of this earth. Help us to seek you and to truly believe your word that says, if we will seek your kingdom first, then all these things will be added unto us. Father, help us to truly believe that and to live that out. And it's in Jesus' holy and precious name I pray and ask these things. Amen. This is our time.